and welcome to this week's YouTube video. Today I'm going to show you how I painted Lolita in Procreate. I met Lolita when I was in Mallorca earlier this year. She had a very friendly demeanour and this is what I was trying to capture in my painting of her. This is the reference photo I used for this one. I changed it quite a bit because the background is very busy and detracts from my subject. I wanted the final painting to have the feel of warm Spanish sun. Even though it wasn't, you can see I'm wearing a scarf. But that is the great thing about painting. The artist can use as much creative license as they want. I dropped my photo into Procreate. I used the harmonic armature to help me place her. If you are not familiar with this tool, then have a watch of this video that is on my channel. I selected that stony colour that is already present in the photo by holding my finger on the screen and then painted over the whole background using a blocking brush like the wet acrylic. When changing backgrounds, you are always better off sticking to a colour that is already present. This will make it less likely that your subject will jar with its background. If I were to select something like a red, I would need to adjust Lolita herself so that she still looked integrated into that background. So decide what you think is the main colour of your background and then use this as your basis for the painting. Here I want to apply a bit of sun, so I'm going to suggest it is hitting the ground and lighten this area. She's also stood on my leg, so I am going to replace that with the suggestion of a step. Plus a ground shadow will make this all a bit more interesting and give me some lovely contrast between the light and dark area. It will also help me with a bit of symmetry as I now have a bit of repetition of my values both top and bottom. You need to think about your composition before you start. The sort of brushes that I will use are a blocking brush like the wet acrylic, some wet brushes like the turpentine brush, a textured brush like the stucco, a soft brush and a pencil. I did this painting over a period of a week. It took me about 7 hours, so it is impossible to show you my exact workings in such a short video, but I will give you the principles of how I did it, so if you wish to try this style of painting, you have a good idea of what to do. I have covered the background in a neutral stony colour, and I have a line drawing of Lolita in red as my top layer. All my other layers will go underneath. This is a simple way to keep my drawing correct. I am using the wet acrylic to block her in. Notice at this stage that the painting has none of that artistic feel to it. This is because I have not introduced any broken colour into this painting and my edges are all hard. I begin to introduce broken colour into the background. Broken colour is a technique that fine artists use all the time. It is where you can see lots of variation of colours and strokes to describe an area. They use this technique to create interest and movement in their paintings. If I show you a comparison of Lolita with no broken colour and with broken colour side by side, notice how the painting is starting to become more interesting. I am using a wet brush to create this effect. Play around with your transparencies. Here I am using about 50% opacity, but I will vary this depending on the effect I am trying to achieve. Next, I need to kill those hard edges on Lolita. I need to create the impression that she is emerging from her background. I do this by using a wet brush to pull out my edges from her. I select the dark black in her coat colour and turn down my opacity to about 30%. I will then do the same with the background by selecting the neutral brown and pushing that into her. This gives me a very soft edge. I then add a bit more background colour. I am using the black in her coat again plus a bit of darker neutral brown. I have turned down my opacity to about 20% and I am using very large strokes in the wet acrylic brush. I think in total that is about 4 brush strokes, so I'm keeping it minimal. Next, I am going to start working on her face. Her face is my area of interest. Therefore, I have already decided that this area will be highly rendered with lots of brush strokes. It will be closer to the reference photo. You will see from the time-lapse video that I spend a lot of time on this area, adding strokes to try and get the likeness as close as I can. I am using a variety of brushes. I have introduced the oil-rich brush, which I downloaded from Photoshop. You will need a Creative Cloud subscription to be able to do this. This brush drops paint quite heavily and it has quite a texture to it. A similar brush in Procreate would be the Larapuna in the artistic section. I am switching between my brushes, laying transparent strokes. I am trying to create a variety of marks, so for example a textured mark against perhaps a wetter mark. I'm having to work quite hard to create this effect. There is not one brush that will give me what I want. I am laying marks over the top of each other and it creates an effect whereby the bottom strokes show through. I am trying to mimic the effect of painting in oils. I paint in oils regularly so I know how the paint handles and how it looks. If you are not an oil painter, I would suggest having a look at some artists' work like John Singer Sargent, Anders Zorn or Richard Smith. Look at their brush strokes and how they layered their colours. They use a variety of brushes, palette knives and even kitchen roll to make their marks. In oil painting, it is impossible to get that effect with only one brush, and it is the same in Procreate. To get that artistic feel, you must be prepared to use a variety of different brushes that make a variety of marks. I have painted Alita's eyes on a separate layer to her face. Notice how I have decided to keep the edges of her ears soft. It creates a sense of movement, almost like she has moved her head and I have caught her in mid-reflection. As I move on to her body, I am using a wet brush with larger strokes on about 70% opacity. I am trying to describe her body in as few strokes as possible. This is completely the opposite to her face and will give the painting contrast and help direct my viewers' attention to her face. I work on multiple layers. Basically, when I have done an area that I like, I just start another layer. This makes it easier to disregard areas that perhaps I don't like so much, or if I go wrong, it's easy to delete. The background needs a bit more attention as I need to now integrate her into it a bit better. I also need to deal with that shadow and address my lighter areas to give it a bit of punch. I have started a new layer and picked a slightly lighter neutral brown. I am now painting rigorously over the top of the painting in large strokes. I am using the turpentine brush. I can then use a rubber to remove the area I don't want the paint to go. So I've rubbed out the strokes that have covered her body and also that shadow. I've then gone into my layers panel and changed the setting on the layer to add. This then gives me that really lovely sun glow without much effort. Finally, I soften a few of the edges in that area by creating a new layer and painting over the top a little. I am using a soft brush and have selected the colour directly above. I turned down the opacity to about 20% and just painted a little over those hard edges. I then print her out and she goes into my online shop. To summarise, for an artistic feel to your Procreate paintings, use broken colour, soften your edges and use a variety of brushes that make different marks. I hope you have enjoyed today's video and found it useful. Please like and subscribe if you can and check out my website sarahhallidayart.com where you will find examples of my work and also details of online classes that I run. Thank you for watching and see you for the next one.